Experts in Britain are warning that a generation of young people may never be able to own their own homes because of a grave housing crisis. Britain has a shortfall of over 4 million homes, the worst record in Europe.
So now what we've seen is the highest number of first-time buyers in 20 years, Mr. Speaker.
He must be the only person in the country who thinks that enough houses have been built in the last 13 years.
The buy-to-let market is no longer what it used to be, and it's changing right before our eyes. And for many, this will be a huge surprise, especially those who have recently entered the market or have been saving for years to get on the investment ladder. Because as someone who has owned property for over 10 years, I am now saying buy-to-lets are dead. And I say that despite knowing that property has historically provided great returns as an investment, and the longer you hold, generally the more forgiving it is. But in today's video, my friends, I will share some more data that adds on the information I presented here not so long ago about why now may be the time to consider putting your money elsewhere, if of course you're after a better investment, especially in terms of returns and risk, because the returns that were once promised in this sector are no longer present. And if you ask me, it's only going to get worse. Now, the first article I wanted to share was something that I've heard many times in recent months. I don't want to sell, but I have to. And it speaks about why the buy-to-let dream is dying. And as we know, buy-to-let mortgage rates have surged to 12-year highs, with many landlords now either loss-making or not making the same profits they once were, causing them to at least consider exiting the market. And as rates have yet to stabilise, I've had some discussions with various brokers over the past few months where their sentiment is that lenders themselves are watching with little certainty as to where the actual market is going. And at this current precise time, it's all a bit up in the air. But with landlords now facing an average increase of £275 by the end of 2024, as many fixed rate deals will expire, you could say they are left with three obvious choices: either to sell, to increase their rents, or to take that hit and if they need to, cash flow the property themselves. But as I mentioned in a shorts video a week back, many people are overly optimistic, stating that they're expecting rates to fall back down, with some stating they simply have to. And I want to just touch on those last three words, because people argue they have to either because it's not wise or feasible to expect people to pay increases in mortgages, or have to because they considered the past decade to be the norm. But if you watch that short clip, my friends, or scroll back through the years, you will realize that the anomaly was in fact the past decade, where rates were ridiculously low. We have been given this false sense of security or promise that these rates are the norm, and people are now waking up to the realization that things may actually be returning back to the true norm. And if we just segue back to rates, the average rate on a 2-year fixed rate buy-to-let mortgage hit 6.96% on July the 12th, surpassing the previous peak of 6.9% after the minute budget last October, which means a typical £150,000 interest-only mortgage on a buy-to-let, which would cost £6,150 a year when the average 2-year buy-to-let rate was 4.1% a year ago, would now cost £10,440, which is a rise of nearly 70%. And according to Hamptons, an average buy-to-let in England and Wales generates rental income of £12,000. And after costs, a typical landlord would expect a clear profit of £4,490, which is probably not as much as many of you would assume, I imagine, watching this video. But if you look at the mortgage costs, which have obviously risen in recent months, profits are set to fall to just £1,780 for basic rate taxpayers, and wait for it, only £120 a year for higher tax rate payers. So there's a huge difference from the £4,490 that Hamptons reported. Now, the Bank of England has come out and stated last week that landlords will keep raising rents, but also added that due to the profits decreasing, they could also sell their properties and exit the market. Now, if this happened, and let's say a huge mass exit from landlords occurred, this could then put a downward pressure on house prices, as stated by the Bank of England, who then go on to finally state, this of course could reduce the supply of properties available to tenants, which would in turn further push up the rents. Now, some people may argue and think landlords leaving will free up stock for them to buy, or others to get on the property ladder. And although I don't think that's necessarily true, because there's a lot more to it than that, the question of what happens if landlords were removed from the market, well, it could well be answered if they choose to exit in the near future. So I guess time will tell. Now, I wanted to share an interesting stat, again by Hamptons, who stated a typical landlord refinancing their 2.2% 2-year fixed rate mortgage at 6% would need to raise rents by 31%. And don't worry, not only do I think that's bonkers, I also think it's not feasible too, because there are 5.5 million private rental homes in the UK, and a third of these households already spend at least half of their take-home pay on rent. So simply wanting to increase rents and actually being able to do it, expecting a tenant to afford it, are two entirely different things. And some more figures for any of you data nerds like me, there are over 2 million buy-to-let mortgages out there, of which 66% are fixed, 18% are on standard variable rates, and 14% on trackers. Now, one thing I'm glad they did mention was that the chronic inability to build more houses in this country is one of the biggest issues we have and a huge reason behind such a dysfunctional housing market. It's not just the landlord's faults, as many people like to say. And reports showed that last week, it was reported that the number of homes available for rent in the UK has actually plunged to a 14-year low. Just 241,000 private rental properties were available in June, compared with 370,000 the same month 4 years ago, which is a 35% drop, according to consultancy 20C. And then if we move over to Zoopla, they also stated that the number of available properties listed on this site is a third lower than before the pandemic came into our lives. And if you want to look at London and the South East, Foxtons reported in April that they had 97,000 prospective tenants on their books and just 2,000 properties to let. These are crazy numbers at the least, and obviously explain why rents are so high. Now, what landlords will do from here until 2025 remains to be seen, but already landlords in Wales and England are already toying with the idea of cutting down the number of properties they currently rent. Profits are not just being squeezed by higher interest rates. We've also had Section 24 damaging the profitability for many landlords, and also we've had increases in legislations and costs associated with the upkeep, which at the end of the day all impact their bottom line. Plus, something that I think often gets overlooked is also the mental side of it too. Too often landlords are painted as the enemy of the state and the sole reason as to why people are unable to buy houses, almost as if they are full of unlimited wads of cash purchasing every single property known to man. And yes, despite some having more wealth and riches than one could arguably spend in a lifetime, many landlords are normal people who have regular jobs and opted to move their money into bricks rather than banks. But before some of you get the miniature violins out, let's keep this video moving. Next up, I want to look at the current market house price trends, inflation and rental figures. According to S&P Global Ratings, the average value of the UK home is expected to fall 12% from peak to trough by the end of 2024. It predicts that UK house prices will fall by 6.6% in 2023 and then by a further 4.9% next year. And after that, the S&P expects the market will stagnate with a growth of just 1.4% and 3% across 2025 and 2026 respectively. And as we are in the middle of 2023, let's just rewind ever so slightly to look at some other predictions for housing markets and their prices in 2023. Price drops were predicted from Lloyds Bank, Zoopla, JLL, Savills, Knight Frank and Capital Economics, who all predicted their drops as you can see by the image. Now, although not quite as high as a 12% by S&P Global, everyone was predicting the market to fall. And just to give you guys some more context, here are the average prices over the past 4 years from Halifax, Nationwide and Rightmove. So, what should we expect? Well, the Office of Budget Responsibility expects prices to drop as we go into the next year, forecasting a 10% drop. But others do differ in their opinions. Because truthfully, nobody really knows where the market will end up. We are currently experiencing uncertain and painful times for both sides of the housing market. Yes, landlords are getting crushed, but so are tenants too. And as a tenant myself, I've seen private rents increase dramatically. Annual private rental prices increased by 4.9% in England, 5% in Wales, and 5.4% in Scotland in the 12 months to May 2023 as well. So rents are definitely impacting many renters out there. And if you're interested, friends, within England, the highest annual percentage change in private rental prices in the 12 months to May 2023 was the West Midlands at 5.2%, while the North East saw the lowest at 4.3%, which if you've seen my other videos is why I'm slightly more biased towards the West Midlands. And don't worry, I haven't forgot London. London's annual percentage change in private rental prices was 5.1% in the 12 months to May 2023, above the England average and its highest annual rate since October 2012. So, despite Rishi Rich tweeting about all the good he's doing and his mission to bring down inflation being at the forefront of his proposals, totally forgetting of course his money printing machine fueled most of it, I truly believe we must buckle up now. Yes, the rate at which prices are rising fell to 7.9% in the year to June, which was down from 8.7% in May. We can't forget that we are still seeing crazy prices on our everyday expenses like bills and food. And as the focus to bring this down continues, in my opinion, we're heading towards a 14th increased interest rate rise on August the 3rd.
You said today you want to be honest, that you're someone who is straight with people. Are you being straight when you say that everything is going to be okay, that you will halve inflation by the end of the year? Do you regret making that a personal priority? And should people trust you if that doesn't happen?
Ali, I absolutely don't think it was a mistake to set as my number one priority halving inflation.